Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a live stream that I definitely didn't expect to be doing today. I had hoped that this week we might actually get some small announcements from Apple, maybe one of their lesser releases. In fact, let me actually give you big mark while I just intro into some stuff. I apologize for my super fluffy hair. I just cannot bring it under control today, no matter what I do. And I'm just not gonna put some gel in it or anything. What I did want, of course, to talk about is the fact that, yes, finally, we are getting an official Apple event, or to be more precise, an Apple experience. And to be more precise, it is coming March 4th. And this is actually the most untypical thing here. We are more than 2 weeks away, of course, from March 4th. I see that my stream's working nice on my iPad. As always, if audio or video quality issues present themselves, please let me know. I already see Riley saying hello in the chat. Hello to Riley. Hello to anyone who's been recently finding the streams. The last one, thankfully, did better than the one before it. So thank you guys for that. Regardless, some big news. Obviously, all the news surrounding this event is everything we have talked about before. I've talked about basically every major rumor in the last couple of weeks, whether it's iPhone 17e. In fact, there has been a John Prosser video in the meantime, and John Prosser has been very non-committal whether or not the iPhone 17e is getting a redesign in the front with a dynamic island. So this is actually still up in the air, but he actually said that his sources are unsure here. So we might get a 17e that's much more interesting, but beyond that, everything else, like the use of a bint A19 chip, the use of a C1 X likely modem and stuff like that, that lines up with everything we have talked about. That also leaves room for, of course, M4 iPad Airs and a base 18 iPad. These are basically chip upgrades, but especially for the base model, that also means more base memory, up from 6 gigabytes on the A16 model to 8 gigabytes on the A18. That actually lines up quite nicely with its naming. And therefore, Apple Intelligence support. Say what you will about Apple Intelligence. I know some people really dislike it. I know some people really don't even believe in it in a way before there's actually like an LLM based Siri. But this is something that, of course, is a marketing point for Apple, and something that across iOS 26.4, 26.5, and then of course iOS 27, those will be basically like repeated marketing points. So it makes sense for Apple to, of course, upgrade all of their devices to that stuff. That leaves a lot of Mac stuff like M4 MacBook Air, Mac Studios, displays. We are very, very overdue for a studio display update or a display for the Pro Display XDR, of course. Jeffrey saying, joined the chat saying, I'm kind of over Apple. I moved to Samsung about 6 months ago, saying it's awesome. I'm absolutely happy for you. This is why I always tell people to vote with their wallets. To be quite honest, I actually think that 2025, 2026 is probably the worst year for Samsung in a way. It's just that their baseline has increased so much over prior years that mostly because their software is just more polished these days, that I couldn't consider Samsung right now if I were to look into alternatives from Apple, or maybe another secondary device. I would be looking more into like a high-end Xiaomi device with like a 7,000 plus milliampere hour battery. I would be looking like into a Vivo X200, 300, whatever Ultra, with full 1-inch sensors and stuff like that. There's a lot that I would be looking to other than Samsung. Now, you said you've switched 6 months ago, so obviously that was well before you would traditionally consider waiting, like for the Galaxy S26 Ultra. Now, I've already outlined on this channel, and I will be covering the event live once it happens, that I actually am quite underwhelmed by the Galaxy S26 Ultra. But again, these are not like Apple fanboy talking points, I am doing like sensible comparisons between Samsung and a lot of what's being offered in the Android space. It's for the same reason that, for example, the Dell XPS, I consider it overpriced, both against MacBooks actually, but also inside the PC space, because inside the PC space, there are obviously way cheaper devices with like a dedicated GPU. There are devices that have a tandem OLED display that actually gets you like 800, 900 or 1000 nits of brightness, while Dell is delivering you a tandem OLED screen that maxes out at 400, 450 nits, which is less than like last gen screens. So obviously everyone is welcome. I've always said that. I'm a tech nerd. I'm not one of those Apple YouTubers who only know about Apple, right? I can talk with you about tech specs of NVIDIA GPUs, Intel and AMD CPUs. I can talk to you about notable laptops and tablets from other competitors. Though, to be quite honest, in the tablet space, my interest is basically zero recently to anything other than iPad. Like, Windows is just not a good fit for like a multi-touch only interface. So while I respect and like some stuff like the Surface, usually I do focus more on Windows laptops and desktops, which interests me more. I just don't know what Apple is offering me anymore to stay there. RCS works with everyone. RCS has never been a marketing feature for anyone I have ever known. Like, just for context, basically every good friend I have is an Android user. Like, in my family, we are mostly Apple users, but here in Germany, the vast majority of people have always been on Android. So one of my best friends is using Samsung Galaxy S25 or 24 Plus. One is using a Pixel 7. One is using an Asus Zenfone 9. So to me, and like I thought that once RCS happens, some people would be like sending me regular SMS, like basically stuff inside the app, but it would be RCS and rich text based and everything. No, everybody just kept using WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal. Like here in Europe, this was never a discussion. For you, Jiffer, I assume that means you're from North America, probably the United States, because that's the only region where I've ever heard this discussion actually matter. The Apple walled garden is allowing people to explore. Now, that has always been the case. I think people vastly overestimate the walled garden, actually how much you're walled in, partially because I think that early on, people actually tended to buy apps from the App Store, and that kind of locked people in, but that was true for everyone, right? Like, you couldn't restore your Google Play purchases on an iPhone, you couldn't play your Steam games on mobile, right? And now those gardens are mostly falling because of subscription services, and because most people play, even if you play like something on your phone, like my nieces and nephew play stuff like Roblox, right? And for them, usually that means just third party, right? They use iPads, they use iPhones, but if they were to switch to an Android, they wouldn't lose any of that stuff. Yeah, Jiffer, you're acknowledging, yeah, this is an American, I wouldn't even argue it's an American problem. It's a problem with the American mindset, because I never would consider myself locked in because my family is using a type of phone or my friends are using a type of phone. I know there is apparently a lot of social pressure around blue bubbles and whatever. I consider that completely childish. I've always told people, like, if iMessage is truly the only reason why you're considering an iPhone, I actually don't think you're going to be very happy. Like, well, maybe if it's your first smartphone, then yeah, sure, you will be happy anyway. But if you have other priorities, if you like stuff like side-loading apps, and this is why, for example, here in Europe, we have enforced third-party app store rules. If you've in the past enjoyed emulators before Apple opened up that stuff, right? That's something that you were missing out on iOS. So yeah, like I fully understand what you're coming from. And hey, I'm glad you found your way here. Even now, as a Samsung Android user, I shouldn't put that in quotes because you are a Samsung user, but this channel is for everyone. We do not talk badly about other hardware except for where it's deserved. Like one running joke on this channel is, for example, us really shitting on the Pixel Tensor chips because they're actually bad, not even because they're not A series good, because a lot of chips are not A series good, but because in the Android space they are by far the worst. Even when switching to 3 nanometer, they couldn't overcome their shortcomings. Benveni, I'm not sure if I already said hi. I'm sorry, I'm babbling on. I'm letting myself be distracted by the chat. Hi, as I'm saying hi to everyone else, whether you're watching live or finding the video later on a Savot, please leave a like. That helps tremendously with the channel. You see, I love interacting with a lively live stream, getting your opinions, your agreements, your disagreements, getting different viewpoints from people all over the world. This is why I do a live stream channel. Live streams are not a great fit for tech content usually on YouTube. The algorithm does not like it. But I do it because it's a hobby of mine, because I enjoy interacting with all of you guys, because we hit quite a high when I was doing more drama-focused stuff and criticizing people like Linus Tech Tips. But now that we are doing a little bit more regular coverage, you'll find our streams are smaller, our community is smaller, but it's all much more cozy, much more refined, much more fun in that way. Jiffer, but you need to understand iMessage, RCS, and SMS is a major problem when you make switches, because iMessage will mess up people connecting to you. Look, I understand. As long as people keep sending iMessage, I fully understand that that's an issue. Don't get. I know what the technological problem here is. No, my main reason is that I think that my family and friends, if they care about me, they will use another messenger, right? That's my argument. And the same goes for me, right? Like I have known people who told me, oh, I only use Signal, right? And I was like, okay, I'm downloading Signal. Who fucking cares, right? That doesn't hurt me. But obviously, yeah, right. If you're like in a family iMessage group chat and there's no RCS, you suddenly switch to Android, that's a different problem. So thank you so much for contributing, Jafar. Seeing you for the first time, as far as I know, but yeah, I let myself get a little bit distracted. And I know it's a people thing. When I say technical issue, I mean the compatibility between like an iMessage and then downgrading it either to an RCS, which is technologically almost on the same level as like an iMessage, or downgrading it to an SMS or MMS, right? Which are then like completely like you lose the formatting of it, you lose any kind of encryption. So of course it's a people thing ultimately, because you can download every app you want, and there are at least half a dozen apps who have iMessage level functionality. In that way, I'm not even claiming that iMessage is so good that it's locking people in, because there are plenty of other apps doing basically the same stuff. Guys, I'm gonna make myself a little bit smaller now for the second. So to anybody who's only joining now because I let myself get distracted, let's get back to the main story of the day. This is something that really, of course, is why I'm here, because to be quite honest, I had a major headache today. I really wanted to just move on and maybe react if there's new hardware tomorrow or something. But Apple is announcing a special. It's not an event, to be quite honest. Apple themselves calls it an experience, and this is an event for the press. It's an event that's going to be happening, or an experience that's going to be happening simultaneously in New York, London, and Shanghai. So you can see Apple definitely is pushing a more international brand image these days. Riley, if the cheap MacBook is more than $699, then I'll talk about it. Riley, let me know what you think the base MacBook is in terms of specs and price, because I think there is a lot more to consider there. I actually think that $699 is probably going to be its final price, and I think similar to $599 for the iPhone SE, I actually believe that the pricing is ultimately going to be good, but for a different reason, like a non-MSRP reason. I've argued about it time and time again on this channel. So guys, let me know actually if you already know what, or if you already expect some stuff for the event. Let me know what you actually are most excited for, right? Let me know, are you looking forward to one of the new iPads? Maybe I think the base iPad upgrade is probably the most exciting, because the redesigned OLED-based iPad mini, it's going to take until the end of the year to come up. Which Mac are you considering maybe not even just being excited about, but getting, right? Are you more of a high-end MacBook guy with like an M5 Max MacBook Pro, or could an eventual M5 Ultra Max Studio tickle your fancy for its immense amount of memory? Maybe you're like an AI researcher and engineer. Riley, no, there's no new iPad mini coming right now. Supposedly, there is one scheduled for the end of the year. So for the end of the year, we basically have iPhone 18 Pro, Pro Max, and iPhone Fold. We have the potentially M6 Pro, M6 Max, MacBook Pro with a tandem OLED screen, and we have... then we have the iPad mini. Let's get back to the event. Or the experience, to be more precise. It's just a simple press event. Now, the one thing that we are going to start talking about, because we always do that, the entire Apple community does it whenever there is an actual Apple invite, is analyzing the actual logo, right? And in this case, we actually have 3 colors represented in that Apple logo. It's yellow, it's green, and it's actually a little bit of blue down below. That blue is actually super subtle. Like, I almost wonder why they don't have another row of blue down there. But yes, and we'll get to a Mark Gurman Power On newsletter from actually yesterday, right? Sunday was yesterday, right? That's how time flies. And according to Mark Gurman, those are all colors that are in consideration for the cheap entry-level MacBook. So the one that Riley just claimed would be an L if it's $699. So it's a special Apple experience. The innovation features a 3D Apple logo design composed of yellow, green, and blue discs, which I wouldn't put anything about like the discs themselves. I mean, they are kind of translucency. They're liquid glasses. Yeah, it is stacked glass, but we obviously, Apple is not whatever some parts of the community might want, right? Apple is not moving away from liquid glass anytime soon. So that could be that. Obviously, it could refer to just the presence of iPads, because iPads are kind of just like a magical thin sheet of glass, whatever, right? I think the main thing here is, of course, the colors, right? Now, some people have also talked about whether or not this could also involve some software. According to Mark Gurman, of course, most better Siri features are being delayed from iOS 26.4 to 26.5. On Twitter, when Twitter is occasionally working, because that has also become apparently an extra part of the nightmare experience that is the new Twitter, which is X experience, widespread outage, posts failing to load. That's on top of the lack of any moderation. That's on top of the fact that their lead engineer said that they couldn't add an extra color to the X user interface. Like, if you remember in the past, dark mode could be a dark tone of blue, right? Other than like pitch black. And some people were asking for a return of that feature, or maybe some kind of customization for dark mode, maybe switch dark gray, dark blue, whatever, right? And he said that they don't have enough engineers to add an extra color, that like maintaining two colors for Twitter is taking up all of their freaking internal resources. um, yeah, Jeffrey, you are correct. These are typical spring colors. That being said, usually there is some hint about actual device colors. Now, one thing that, of course, is kind of missing here, not that it has really been rumored, is, of course, that in prior years, Apple has done quite a few spring refreshes for all kinds of different products, just in terms of colors. The iPhone 17 Pro currently stands as one of the most colorful Pro lineups, but one of that is least diverse in terms of the colors that it's offering, right? Like obviously we have the dark blue, we have the silver, and we have the cosmic orange. Like, could we see another color for the iPhone 17 Pro as well, or even for the base iPhone 17, right? Just to reignite some sales, maybe some Chinese red or whatever. Though that would be a little weird bringing out so late after Chinese New Year, of course. Yeah, but these are colors that, I mean, I don't even talk about, like, I'm not one of the channels that hyper analyzes these kinds of icons and invite logos, but in this case it does match up. Of course, that is what we got from Apple today. Like, this isn't even like an Apple newsroom announcement, so there isn't even like some official wording from Apple that I can refer to. What basically is happening, this is an Apple experience that's scheduled for 9 a.m. Eastern Time on March 4th, 2026. With it, this is a Wednesday, right? This is why my speculation is that Apple is going to be announcing products from Monday to Wednesday on that week, right? Maybe the lesser products like the 12th Gen iPad and the iPad Air refresh, maybe they could come on Monday. Then maybe the iPhone 17e and an accessory like the Apple TV could come out on Tuesday. And then maybe the Wednesday, the main day with the actual event, could feature Macs, right? Like the all-new low-cost MacBook. Now, they are referencing an A18 chip. A18 is quite old, as a rumor. Mark Gurman himself have started calling it an iPhone class chip, right? Whenever he refers to that MacBook. So there is a chance that that MacBook could come with an A19 chip. And it should also be noted that it's most likely going to be a Pro chip. There is some differences with like storage speed, support, and whatever. Obviously, total RAM amount. Now, that's not really a technical limitation because the bandwidth is technically the same and everything, the bus width. But historically, given everything else Apple is doing, like, I mean, they put an M series chip in the iPad Air. I wouldn't be surprised if the low-cost MacBook, especially if it's more $700 rather than $600, could come with an A19 Pro rather than an A18 Pro. And yeah, I've mentioned already accessories. Now with HomePod Mini, it's one of two HomePod products we're expecting. We've heard some rumors that the HomePod Mini would not actually get an Apple N1 Wi-Fi chip that would bring Wi-Fi 7 support and Threads and Bluetooth 6, but instead it would get a pretty cheap MediaTek modem, one that still would be better than the current Wi-Fi 4 stuff, but basically not as good as what you're getting in more premium Apple devices. Same is true for the Apple TV, apparently. So basically, Apple is treating N1 as more of a high-end wireless solution, so these cheaper products are not getting it. That's especially disappointing for me for the Apple TV, given that with A17, I think it has more than enough horsepower to last you years and years. Would be nice, of course, if it also had the wireless capabilities to keep up on that. But with the HomePod Mini, I do not expect it necessarily to come out alongside everything else. Simply because HomePods are very much connected to the current state of Siri, and I do not expect the HomePod HomePod Mini, but especially the big HomePad, to come until we get the large language model based Siri. Uh, Riley saying, I hope the low-cost MacBook has some mature people colors and not a Teletubbies lineup. I'll go through all the colors that Mark Gurman mentioned. I would be surprised if there isn't at least like silver, right? One thing that I could see Apple do is not offer a dark version, right? That's something they haven't done, for example, for the current iMac, right? That's why people complain about the white bezel, because you can go with a neutral color like silver, and yeah, the white matches it somewhat. I like it. I like white bezels. I know most people don't. But then even if you spring for a darker but colorful color, you still get the white bezels in the front. And yeah, so I could see some of that being also the design language for the cheaper MacBook, basically being focused mostly on a more kiddie market, but still giving you at least one option that's kind of more adult, more neutral in nature. Jiffer saying, how amazing would it be to make a lower price Mac target schools and audience with colored laptops like they used to? I think that's exactly what they're going to be doing, Jiffer. In fact, when we get to actually the only actual like news reporting that I can reference for this, because as I said, this Apple experience invite is just, well, it's an email sent to the press, right? But something that came out yesterday, according to Mark Gurman, who's of course from Bloomberg, a very notable leaker, saying Apple's low-cost aluminum MacBook. So if you were somebody who was arguing for the return of the classic plastic, unapologetically plastic MacBook, that one is not happening. The industry has done a lot to catch up with Apple in terms of build quality. Usually you will actually still pay more for a well-built like Dell XPS laptop than a comparably spec'd MacBook. That's more due to logistics of scale. It's not because Apple is actually generous. Apple just has fewer models. Those models sell better, and that allows them to give you basically much that allows them to have much better pricing on like aluminum to bring back some Johnny Ive memes, machined aluminum and stuff like that. So yeah, and basically the point that Mark Gurman is making, first, Riley, to your question about the price, according to Mark Gurman, he's saying this is well under $1,000, which is of course what it needs to be, because the MacBook Air is of course $1,000, and the M4 MacBook Air regularly is available for around $800, anywhere from $850 to actually all the way down to $750. Now that's in the United States. Obviously pricing in other regions varies based on currencies, based on the inclusion of value-added taxes, and sometimes pricing outside of the US is just generally higher, no matter the regulations or no matter the taxes. Thank you, Apple, I guess. Mark Gurman also says it's going to be running an iPhone chip, right? So this is to all the, if you find reporting that references A18, right, A18 Pro to be more precise, I'm not saying that's an outdated rumor, right, but it is an older rumor at that point that still needs some upgrading. It could be an A19 Pro at this point, or it could be an A18 Pro, but then I definitely would actually agree with Riley saying that $700 would feel a little bit on the expensive side. Now, the other point, of course, is now that applies, to be honest, to all Macs, but something that would particularly stick out here is, of course, education prices. Like, Jiffer, you mentioned making that MacBook specifically for like the education market, not exclusive to the education market, it, but making it a big marketing and selling point of the device. I think that, and at that point, when you actually think about it, right, those devices don't need Thunderbolt, they don't need terabytes of storage even as an option, they don't need much more than 12 gigs of RAM, right? So and they don't need the raw power of DM4, DM5, considering that the A18 Pro already matches DM1 in multi-core and beats it in almost everything else, right? Obviously it beats it handily in single core. In terms of graphics, it has obviously hardware accelerated ray tracing, mesh shading support, much better AI acceleration. It all gets a big boost if you move up to the A19 Pro. So I think that you can make an A-series chip work in a Mac. It is a little bit of a disappointment that Apple is not doing more to boost the value of the Mac. I think that my main shortcomings of the Mac in terms of value proposition do come down to storage these days. I think the MacBook Air should be 512 gigabytes. I think the MacBook Pro should be either a full 1 terabyte with the $1,600 version or something like an in between, like 768 gigabytes. And then the M Pro and the Max versions should, of course, come with 1 terabyte. I think that would ultimately also benefit Apple. Now, not in the profit margin space, I admit that, but it would encourage way more people to download more professional applications, big games, and that would bring in money to the App Store, to Apple services and things like that. So that's one of my criticisms. I really do hope that Apple does not consider going with 128 gigabytes on this MacBook. I actually think 256 gigabytes for this device would be a decent fit. I think it's $600 is actually great for it to have 256 gigabytes. Mind you, of course, the MacBook Air starts with 256 at 1,000. Even the 15-inch at 1,100 and obviously more starts with 256. So if this is $600 and has 256 gigabytes and maybe 12 gigs of RAM, I think that's great. If it's 128, honestly, I would just say look at a cheaper, discounted, or refurbished MacBook Air, or even a much older MacBook Pro. At that point, you will get features that simply do not exist yet on MacBook Air and obviously won't exist on that low-cost MacBook. Higher refresh rates, higher screen brightness levels, much better speakers and things like that. Now, one thing that Mark Gurman is basically now committing to, because this is now one of several times that he has mentioned it, is saying that the screen is just under 13 inches. Now, if you know, of course, about the regular MacBook or the MacBook Air, which for most intents and purposes is currently the regular MacBook, Riley, you're saying it's probably 8 gigs of RAM. At that point, it needs to be, though, then $600. Because, yes, I know, obviously, Apple has like an $800 iPhone with 8 gigs of RAM. And up until recently, even the $1,300 iPad Pro had 8 gigs of RAM on the M4 version before being upgraded to M5. I hope that Apple just uses the specs from the A19 Pro on the iPhone 17 Pro, and if they need maybe to play around with some RAM specs, I would like for them to use the A19 Pro from the iPhone Air, which still has 12 gigs of RAM, but downclocks that memory a little bit for maximum efficiency to 8500 megahertz memory, 8533 to be more precise, rather than the full 9600. Now, when it comes to the screen, I've seen some people say it just will get the 12.9-inch screen of the iPad Air, and previous iPad Pros. I do not quite believe that. Now, when think about MacBook screens traditionally, for years they've been 16 by 10 aspect ratio. Then Apple added a little bit of on top for the notch with the menu bar on top, and that of course pushed the screen from 16 by 9 to somewhat close to 3 by 2, but not yet quite 3 by 2, as for example what Microsoft uses on their Surface tablets and laptops. But it's also not the 4 by 3 aspect ratio of the iPad, right? Especially not the big iPad, which is exactly 4 by 3, right? Like a traditional, like a television, right? Like an old television, I mean. I don't think that that's a good fit for Mac OS. Now, to max out logistics, could I see that happening? Maybe. But to be quite honest, I think it just would make more sense for Apple to, like, basically use like a smaller version of the previous 13.3 inch screen, right? But instead of adding something on top for a screen that's taller than 16 by 10, you instead cut off actually something from the sides, right? And then you would end up also roughly under 13 inches. You would get a resolution of still around 2560, like on the width, which is of course the resolution of the MacBook Air, which of course lines up quite nicely with 720p content and 1440p content, right? And I think that that's still workable. And then you would have about like 0.8 inches of difference, right, versus the MacBook Air. And this, add to that a potentially slightly thicker bezel, and then you have a visual difference. And I don't think you need to go as far as just giving it an already existing iPad screen. That's at least my speculation. Obviously, this is one where my speculations are not very firmly held beliefs, right? Like, for example, one of my speculations is that any kind of reference of an AirPods Pro camera are wrong, right? I do believe we're gonna get infrared cameras or sensors so you will be able to swipe in front of your face, so for air gestures, and then Apple could maybe redesign the stem a little bit, all that stuff, right? But actual like RGB cameras, like the way that Mark Gurman talked about it months ago, suggesting it would be used for augmented reality and for visual intelligence, together with your iPhone and things like that. That I do not have obviously any insider information, but after years of following Apple, I can confidently tell you that this is not something that Apple does. Adding a full like regular RGB camera would kill battery life. It would require a much more powerful chip, which would totally screw up with the internals, which then would kill battery life even more. It would be incredibly hard to market. It would be a privacy nightmare. Like, do you remember all those rumors from so many years about the Apple Watch getting a camera? Whatever happened to that, right? Just because Apple internally might consider some stuff and even play with some prototypes does not mean that that's actually a product that's going to come to market in that way. Now, obviously, we talked about some tech specs about that cheaper MacBook. Obviously, an iPhone chip, either an A18 Pro or an A19 Pro, with all the downgrades that would entail, like a lack of Thunderbolt, in my opinion, less total memory at the very least. Not sure if they will offer like more memory. Maybe there'll be like a 256 gigabyte option with 8 gigs, right? But then if you upgrade to a 512 gigabyte option, you'll get 12 gigs or something like that, right? A little bit like how the iPad Pro works, where it starts with 12 gigabytes, but if you upgrade from the 512 gigabyte model all the way up to 1 terabytes or 2 terabytes, in addition to the extra storage, you also get more memory. So something like that I could see happen. a slightly smaller display. Obviously, I expect this screen to be 60 hertz, between 4 and 500 nits of brightness, standard LCD, and Retina level pixel density of 220, in line with the MacBook Air. So, which actually, if it were to just use the 13-inch display from the iPad Air, it would actually have the highest pixel density of any MacBook, because currently the MacBook Pros have higher pixel density. They have around 250. I believe 254 or 256 is the exact number. The MacBook Air has around 220, 222. Depends a little bit on how much you round the actual screen size. But yeah, the iPad obviously has like a 2000 by 2700 screen. It's 13 inches, 12.9. It has 264 pixels per inch. That would make it the highest pixel density screen. This is one of the reasons why I don't think they're just going to reuse an iPad Air or older iPad Pro screen. Now, according to Mike Gurman, one thing that Apple isn't cutting here, because everything else is, of course, a cut down from the MacBook Air, especially versus the upcoming M5 MacBook Air, right? And that thing is going to be build quality. Apparently, it's still being built out of aluminum. It's not plastic. It's not a return to the old plastic MacBooks. I also assume, by the way, and that just makes sense, that this MacBook is just going to be called MacBook, just as the base iPad is called the iPad, right? We call it sometimes like the 12th generation iPad for the upcoming version. We call it sometimes by the chip inside, like the base iPad is currently being rumored to be upgraded to an A18 processor. At that point, I might refer to it as a base iPad or an A18 iPad, right? I assume this will not be like a MacBook SE. Obviously, the SE branding is dead. I don't think this DE branding makes sense, because Macs don't have numbers the way that like Apple can do with like, oh, an iPhone 17 is the base model, but the 17 Pro is better. Oh, the 17E, that's the cheaper version. I don't think that's going to be happen. I think this is just going to be MacBook, but unlike the MacBooks of yore, it's not going to be plastic. It's still going to be aluminum. And to stick with this premium material, Apple developed a new manufacturing process that allows the shells to be forged more quickly. The technique is designed to be both faster and more cost effective than the one used with current Apple laptops. I wouldn't be surprised if the material overall is in the end product thinner, so maybe there's a little bit more deck flex, a little bit more screen flex versus other Macs, but I also don't expect it to suddenly be iPhone 6 level bendable, right? Riley saying, I like using aluminum foil for conspiracy theories. Well, yeah, actually, if they make it really thin, you could actually like put it like a folded, like one of these stupid aluminum foil hats, right? And it could look like that, though it will be too large for most heads. My head is quite big, but I think it would still be too big for even my big head. Apple will market the machine to students and enterprise users. So, Jiffer, this is where you have been correct. I also assume that Apple might have a more generous discount for education. So think about it, if for example a $1,000 MacBook Air can get a $100 discount for education purposes, right? That would lead you to believe that maybe like this at $600 would get like a $50 discount, right? But let's say it actually starts at $700, something that Riley referred to as being an L pricing for this, right? Well, what if it costs $700 by default, but it still maintains a full $100 discount for education purposes, and with it, it actually then, like, that's a much larger percentage, from a 10% discount to like a 15, even like depending on how low we start, like an 18% 15% discount from the price, right? So that's definitely something, a card that Apple could also play. This is why I argue $700 is not going to be an immediate failure for this device, but that of course depends on its exact specs. If it comes with 12 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage, I think it actually it probably deserves to be around $700 given how the MacBook Air pricing works. Plus, don't forget, except for educational discounts, there are also other forms of discounts, right? And there's, of course, just regular Amazon discounts. After a few weeks or months a product has been on the market, I've talked about how the M4 MacBook Air, now that it's been about a year, is regularly available for up to $250 under MSRP, and that's despite all the RAM and storage pricing fluctuations that we have seen in the PC space in recent months. I think that this could start at $700, but become much more likely to be sold at around $620, $630. Yes, at $800, I'm not even arguing. Now, this is, of course, if we are talking dollars. Again, European prices will include value-added tax and things like that. So I will use US dollars as a reference. I think at $800, it just makes no sense. Because at $800, it's way too close to an M4 MacBook Air. An M4 MacBook Air will destroy in most stuff, even the A19 Pro chip. So plus, of course, that's Thunderbolt, that's a larger screen, that's more base memory, most likely. I don't think that that's a price difference that makes sense. I think this device starts to make sense at $700, and around $650, whether it's through a discount or through official pricing, I think it starts to make actual sense to buy. Elam joining Mac Mini also included in this launch. This is interesting because according to everything that we have seen thus far, no. Apparently the spring refresh is a lot of the stuff that you can see in my thumbnail. So that's iPads, that's the base iPad and iPad Air, not the iPad Mini and not the iPad Pro. It's the iPhone 17e. It's some accessories, probably not all, maybe the Apple TV, most likely not the HomePod Mini. And then for the Macs, we're looking at the M5 MacBook Air, basically just a regular cheap chip 10 times in a row, right? Chip refresh from the M4 MacBook Air. Maybe it gets like the N1 chip for better Wi-Fi, which would actually put it in some ways ahead of the M5 MacBook Pro, and M5 Pro and M5 Max MacBook Pros. Mac Mini, Mac Studio, iMac, and Mac displays seem to be more of like a mid-2026 refresh. So we could actually see them either right before or even at WWDC. By the way, my leg is itching. I'm not scratching anything else, just my freaking leg. I just realized that with the way it's cut out, you see my hand moving. My hands are fully innocent, YouTube. It's all, I'm actually not even cursing today, so I think this stream is actually even kid ready. Yeah, so Mac Mini, most likely not. I realize that a lot of people right now, because of OpenClaw, are actually very Mac Mini excited. But apparently, like, well, it also depends, to be quite honest, right? Right now, Mac Mini orders will bring you like to mid-March. So you're like have to wait for a full month for like the M4 Mac Mini, especially for the higher RAM versions, because those are the versions where OpenClaw, previously Claude bought, previously Mold bought, now bought by OpenAI. I realized that that's apparently a very popular use case for it. I'm not sure even how popular that thing is, or if Apple just made so few Mac Minis that even an internet meme like that was enough to push Mac Minis into like into not available territory. But yeah, desktop Macs are basically coming a little later. It Could it be still up in the air? Of course. I mean, think about it. The M5 MacBook Pro already has existed for months. We are getting an M5 MacBook Air, right? So yeah, if you think about it just realistically, of course you would be getting, oh, by the way, I think, yeah, I put actually the M4 on my thumbnail on the M5 MacBook Air. I'll probably go back to my thumbnail after this. I probably just should put the A19 Pro on that MacBook, just so it actually becomes the cheaper MacBook. But according to Mark Gurman, the colors that are being discussed for this aluminum playful color education focused MacBook are light yellow, light green, blue, pink, classic silver, and dark gray, which for anyone who was asking about like not Teletubby colors, you're still getting classic silver and dark gray. I also think after all the backlash that Apple has accumulated over time for the wide bezels on the iMac, which interestingly enough has not resulted in them giving even one black bezel iMac option. Like they could have just made a black iMac, right? Either space gray or space black or whatever they would call it, and that would justify giving it black bezels. I don't think that we are actually going to see any color issues here, and so I think that dark gray will actually look quite serious. Now, according to Mark Gurman, not all of these colors will ship, and we have 3 of these colors being represented in the Apple logo, of course. That's part of this invite, right? We have yellow, light green, light blue. In fact, like this light blue is basically such a small part of the icon. So does that mean that like pink won't be in the lineup? I'm not sure, right? Apple could have decided that 5 colors might be enough. So 3 playful colors and 2 more neutral colors. That would roughly line up with a lot of the stuff that they do on the base iPad. When you think about the colors there, for example, I actually forget what are the current colors for the A16 iPad. So yeah, it's blue, pink, and yellow, right? So yeah, that makes sense. Just replace the pink here with green. Keep, of course, the silver, or maybe a dark gray, or maybe have both. We have Angelica, one of our MarkCheck Pro Max supporters, joining the chat, saying hi. Hi to everyone, guys. You can see that the live chat today is a little bit more lively than usual, obviously because we have a big topic to discuss. Because we're about an hour into the stream, I hope you forgive me some self-promotion. If you're enjoying this video, please hit the like button. That helps tremendously. It helps attract new people. It tells the algorithm that you actually enjoy my videos. Subscribe to the channel, therefore, to see everything else that's on this channel and everything that's about to come. For that, also hit the notification bell, of course. Share the video out with anybody who you think might enjoy it. Friends, family members, who also tech enthusiasts. Comment. You guys obviously see I love interacting with a lively live stream. You can also support me directly right while I'm live by sending a super chat or a super sticker right into the live chat. And you can become a channel member right here on YouTube or on Patreon. Shout out to all our MarkCheck Pro Max members, Angelica, Steve, Max Maximus, and Jonathan. So I apologize for the quick self-promotion, but yeah. But thank you. And with that, of course, with those more lively iPad colors, I think it makes a lot of sense that some of that is also going to apply to the base iPad. We know, of course, the higher up you go, the more muted Apple's colors tend to become. Ironically, though, the iPhone 17 Pro is now a pretty major exception with its cosmic orange, a very vibrant, a very in-your-face color. Riley saying, finally a stream without AI news. I know, Riley, you haven't really been commenting a lot, though I know from your highs that you've still been watching occasionally, because a lot of the stuff we've talked about before is like AI Siri and even some competitive stuff and Gemini integration and all that. Even some stuff about like third-party AI tools that are available for Mac. And I know for you it's like, right? Yeah, but basically the colorful stuff here totally lines up with what we see Apple do on other base models. In fact, like the colors actually line up pretty well. Like we have yellow, blue, and pink on the current base iPad. We obviously know Apple has a long history of doing different shades of green, even on the Pro iPhones. Obviously, that wouldn't be light green, but still, right? So that could be a consideration. Green is one of my least favorite colors in that regard, so it's definitely not something that I would be considering, but I believe Jiffer mentioned, yeah, those are spring refresh colors. It just makes sense for a spring device. You can even like market it with like a forest in the background, something playful like that. Riley saying I laughed at them when Siri news says Siri got like the new AI Siri got delayed. Well, if you were somebody who believes that Apple cannot function without a best-in-class chatbot or whatever, then yeah, those people deserve to be laughed at, because just look at Apple's last quarterly report, right? Obviously they're doing extremely well without AI, right? Like, sure, they have AI, and the Mac Mini we mentioned just before, like OpenClaw and the integration of stuff like that. We have stuff like MLX for even multi-device compute for AI that Apple is pushing even through the open source community. I follow one guy on Twitter who's great about that. Follow me on Twitter, by the way, if you're interested in any of that. But yeah, if you like, you shouldn't laugh at somebody who's just saying, "Oh, I just wish Siri to be better," right? Like, and I wish Apple to finally bring us features like on-screen awareness, personal context, and app intent control, right? I think that those features are promised by Apple, and I think that those features need to make it to the market sometime in 2026. Otherwise, you really should start getting worried about it. But then anything beyond that, you'll find me actually not being excited about any of that. Like a regular freaking chatbot, when like I was celebrating on this channel when the news came out that supposedly the AI health coach was canceled internally, and that instead Apple is rolling out some of those planned features just as regular app updates for the health app, right? Because I was saying, no, current probabilistic LLMs are definitely not good enough to work with very sensitive health data. Anything that's like very chatbot, like I believe they recently made a study and said that like basically more than 1 and 2 times, like between 50 and 60%, if you argue with a chatbot, it's actually just gonna give you another opinion, right? Just randomly. It doesn't hold firmly to any beliefs. And imagine doing that with completely crucial private data like your medical stuff, right? You're just gonna ask them, well, do you think I need to get healthier or whatever? And it says, yes, of course, your cardiovascular health is terrible. Your average heart rate is too fast. Your heart rhythm is too irregular. And then imagine if you actually were to argue with it and suddenly it changes its mind, right? You're like, well, are you sure? Don't you think that considering my overall stress levels at work and at home, I'm doing quite well? And then the AI will be like, you know what? Yeah, I actually think you are quite healthy. And we have actually seen that when ChatGPT allowed to integrate health data into their own app, people were able to get completely different results from the same set of data out of ChatGPT, right? So this is coming from yesterday's report. Mark Gurman believes this MacBook to launch as early as March. Should even said like early March, because I think that it's a prime candidate to launch around that March 4th event. Once again, it's not an event, it's an experience for the press. I think we're actually gonna start seeing new Apple devices rolling in from like March 2nd on Monday. So as I've speculated already in the stream, maybe one day for iPads, one day for the iPhone 17e, and then one day for Macs. And of course, the other major thing about it is the new MacBook Pro. With that, we're getting the M5 Pro and M5 Max chip. These are Apple's first Apple Silicon chiplet chips outside of the Ultras, which have a very rudimentary chip interconnect. It's basically two full-featured SoCs. There's no 2.5D stacking. It's completely 2D. So this will be a notable step forward. And then with the M6 generation, we are looking at the M6 Pro and M6 Max MacBook Pro potentially coming late 2026 still. And that would have like a tandem OLED display or redesign. A lot of new stuff. And yes, because some of you have asked about the Mac Mini, iMac and Mac Mini are on the docket. Now, according to Mark Gurman, a Mac Studio update is near as well. And that, of course, doesn't help because now we know that in 2.5 weeks we have an event. I do find it unlikely that Apple would stick just the Mac Studio, just slam jam in the middle of all the other announcements. But it could happen, right? If Apple just thinks, oh, we need some kind of replacement for the M3 Ultra. Guys, if you go to my Discord, you'll find a link in the description. You'll find a lot of us being disappointed by how Apple treats the Mac Pro, right? I mean, that Mac Pro is still stuck on the M2 Ultra chip. Even the Mac Studio, while it's getting much more regular upgrade, and the M4 Max version is objectively great, both for the money and for especially its power consumption level. The M3 Ultra is very impressive for the fact that it offers up to 512 gigs of RAM. And while pricing on that can look quite ridiculous, it's actually not as ridiculous as it might seem versus a lot of like the AI server space. Like when you compare it to like a 96 gigabyte version of what's essentially the RTX 5090, you'll find that that by itself costs almost as much as a 512 gigabyte Mac Studio. So yeah, quite a lot of actually pretty well-priced stuff in the Apple ecosystem these days. Riley saying, I hope the 17e goes harder on the bigger battery. Well, to be honest, I don't think that the battery is what holds back the iPhone 16e. I think the iPhone 16e is held back by a few of its components. Mainly, obviously, I think that the lack of MagSafe sucks. I think a lot of people, if you just want to add more battery, you'll just get a small battery pack, whether it's 5,000 milliamp hours, so it can be thin, or 10,000. Like I have a 10,000 milliamp hour MagSafe battery, and like that's more than enough to charge than a 4,000 mAh device, at least 1.5 times, probably closer to 2 times. If all devices lose a different amount of stuff during wireless charging, but I think what holds back the iPhone 16e for its battery life are first its old inefficient screen. So that screen maxes out at what, 800 nits, while everything else is 1,000 nits, 2,000 nits, 3,000 nits now in the 17 series. And part of that is LTPO, more efficiency, also better cooling, but especially that higher efficiency. And that old panel uses as much energy as those devices might get closer to 1,000 nits. It uses it at 600 nits, right? Because it's an older panel. And I think that if Apple just gave it the same screen as is on the iPhone 16, right? Even on the iPhone 15 with the dynamic island, I think that would boost efficiency enough that, don't forget, the iPhone 16e has a larger battery than the base iPhone 16 or the base iPhone 17. It has almost 4,000 milliamp hours, while the iPhone 16 is around 3,500. Well, they're both 3,600-ish, both the iPhone 16 and 17. There's no big capacity difference, right? And the other thing is its modem. It's not just a slower modem that's Wi-Fi 6. It's not even Wi-Fi 6E, right? Much less Wi-Fi 7. But it's just an older, much less efficient modem. And I think that if Apple gives a DN1 chip, that's of course on top of improving the C1 with either a C1X or maybe a C2, then I think that with 4,000 milliamp hours, this device would have amazing battery life on a 6.1-inch display. Plus, if Apple trims down its bezels, it could be about the same size as the 6.3-inch iPhone 17, which of course I don't expect the bezels to be as thin as on the base iPhone 17. And we would have a very compact device that has a nice size battery with efficient enough components, with support for a crucial accessory ecosystem like MagSafe. And yes, its main screen is not as good as the iPhone 17. Its main camera is not as good as the iPhone 17. It doesn't charge as fast as the iPhone 17. It probably doesn't have the same speaker quality as the iPhone 17. But that's what you're paying 25% less, or if you're looking from the $600 up, then what you're paying 33% more to get the 17. Riley, I think Apple should also give us the dynamic island. It's not like it will get the Instagram model wannabees to ditch the Pro Max. Yeah, like I don't like the idea of not giving us the dynamic island. I've been pretty outspoken about this because I just think that like dynamic island now goes back to the iPhone 14 Pro. The base iPhone 15 had it. I don't think that that's a major differentiation point. I think the slimness of the bezels, the screen brightness, the presence of ProMotion, those are much better differentiation points. We see how it boosts, obviously, the iPhone 17. And even then, Riley, you're still correct, right? Like the iPhone 17 is closer to the 17 Pro and Pro Max in many crucial ways than even the iPhone 16 was to the 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max. But the 17 Pro and 17 Pro Max still are better sellers in the lineup, right? Which a lot of people did not expect. A lot of people believed that the base iPhone 17 would do quite a lot of cannibalizing. But it seems some people, like me, are just married to the idea of getting Pros, getting Pro Maxes, of course. Now that there is no Plus model, you need the Pro Max for the largest version. So, yeah. Ben Vinny, you just shared a big piece of breaking news today. Even though I don't think we're actually quite ready with... Oh my God, this is actually great. So thank you to Ben Vinny for sharing this. I probably would have updated Mac Rumors at the very end of the stream, but thankfully I'm doing it right now. Breaking news, guys. iOS 26.4, iPadOS 26.4 is launching, which is funny. Now I'm not sure if I should be installing iOS 26.4 because I actually got my speaker replaced on my iPhone for the speaker crackling issue that I've mentioned, but that speaker crackling is still there. So it's either an issue because of the charging port or because of the overall device. And I do have an appointment made for this Friday, but man, I'm really itching to install 26.4. But then again, I don't think that I will be prohibited from getting a replacement or repair just because I use 26.4. So let's actually look into this. What are we getting? Apple Podcasts getting video episodes in iOS 26.4. Man, maybe I should start uploading because I do still have an Apple Podcast subscription as a podcast content creator. The feature uses HTTP live streaming, HLS, to provide podcast creators with unprecedented control and monetization opportunities while also providing a high-quality viewing experience. 20 years ago, is this a newsroom announcement? Where's that? Are they getting this at? Am I just Apple Newsroom? Change to English. Yeah, okay, so we can actually read that from here. Apple Podcasts will enable HLS video podcasts with a best-in-class experience. So right now, I believe video podcasts can work, but you need some kind of weird intermediary, so it's not quite like YouTube. And Apple is now competing in that regard with YouTube. Apple today announced a transformative update coming to Apple Podcasts this spring that will bring advanced video podcast capabilities to the app. This enhanced video podcast experience uses Apple's industry-leading HTTP live streaming Is that actual live streaming or is just video? Can I do both? Can I live stream on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts? Let's see. To set a new standard that empowers podcast creators with unprecedented control and monetization opportunities while delivering the highest quality viewing experience for users. 20 years ago, Apple helped take podcasting mainstream by adding podcasts to iTunes. It's interesting that this has not leaked in any way before that. More than a decade ago, we introduced the dedicated Apple Podcast apps at EduQ. Yeah, I believe before that it was just in iTunes. Apple's senior vice president of services. Today marks a defining milestone in that journey. By bringing a category-leading video experience to Apple Podcasts, we are putting creators in full control of their content. Man, that's a big attack on YouTube and how they build their businesses while making it easier than ever for audiences to listen or watch podcasts. In the Apple Podcast app, users will be able to switch seamlessly between watching and listening to shows, making the experience of discovering and viewing video podcasts as simple and enjoyable as listening to audio podcasts has always been. Users can watch video from within the app and move to horizontal full display, as well as download videos to watch offline. So this is something that apparently doesn't need premium like on YouTube. And automatic quality adjustment powered by HLS technology ensures smooth playback across network conditions, delivering the best possible experience whether listeners are on Wi-Fi or on cellular. Video episodes will integrate with existing features Apple Podcasts already love, including personalized recommendations and editorial curation on the new tab and in category pages. I assume it will also then get features like transcript, right? Because that's already something that you can, if you actually go to Apple prior keynotes in the Apple Podcast app, that obviously works with automatic transcription. The new video podcast experience empowers creators. Creators distribute through participating hosting providers and ad networkings, maintaining complete control of their content and monetization. AVCast, AirT90, Amazon Company, SiriusX, blah, 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 are supporting HLS video at launch with additional providers to join in the future. For the first time, creators can dynamically insert video ads, including host read spots, unlocking access to the broader video advertising market. Well, okay, so it seems like you are not actually be able to upload stuff the way it works on YouTube. You will need basically a third party that to basically guarantee that you are not like a random bum uploading and filling up Apple servers. Video integrates seamlessly into existing shows without disrupting followers and downloads. So it seems like it's not going to be focused on individual videos. It's still going to be focused on actual, like, well, the whole podcast with individual episodes. It's just that these episodes are now going video. So it doesn't disrupt followers or downloads, and creators can monetize through sponsorships and dynamic advertising. Apple does not charge hosting providers or creators to distribute podcasts on Apple Podcasts. That's a big thing. Whether via traditional RSS, MP3, or HLS video, Apple will charge participating ad networks an impression-based fee for the delivery of dynamic ads in HLS video. That like we have talked about Apple in putting ads into certain stuff. By the way, let me make myself a little bit smaller so I don't cover up too much of the actual story. We've talked about Apple inserting stuff into potentially maps and things like that, and you guys know that I am negative to split on most of those ad integrations. I think they were actually good for something like the App Store, but then some of the newer ideas definitely are a little bit much. Like maps integration, I think it can work. I don't think it has to be egregious, but it also doesn't sound great, to be quite honest. This is where I actually think the core idea is great, where Apple will be like, well, if you're doing sponsorships or you have like a dynamic or a non-dynamic ad inside the video, like when you think about LTTs like segways, right? That's for you and for your distributor to decide. But if you also want dynamic ads that might be tailored to a specific user, that might be dynamic to the type of content you provide, like if I were to post this, if this was like just a tech video, it would be most likely tech related ads. Then we take and then we'll charge participating ad networks an impression-based fee. That absolutely makes sense, and that's another opportunity for Apple to pretty morally collect more user data, ad data, and of course money. Apple Podcasts is synonymous with podcasting itself. Bringing video to the platform is a defining moment. Yeah, of course, like the word podcast is derived from iPod and broadcasting, right? So Apple basically created that term, and they are still pretty dominant in it, but just because of how big YouTube is, not just for podcasts, but for all video content, Apple kind of lost a lot of that ground, right? And then obviously Spotify went into podcasting. So yeah, this is basically Apple clapping back a little. Expanding what's possible for creators, advertisers, and the medium as a whole, said Greg Glenday, a Cast CEO. So that's one of those partners basically here that's a participating host provider, apparently. We are proud to help lead this evolution, unlocking new audiences and revenue for Acast creators and a premium new canvas for brand storytelling. This integration reinforces our position as a vital growth energy for modern podcast businesses. We're ensuring that no creator or advertiser leaves revenue or reach on the table. So basically we have similar statements also from like the ART19 guys, the Sirius XM guys, Triton Digital. So these are all the things. Podcast hosting providers and podcast creators can learn more about how to enable HLS video in Apple Podcasts, as well as how to use Apple products and tools to capture, produce, and share exceptional video podcast episode at podcasters.apple.com. I'll look into it. Maybe there is some way for me to get like an intermediary like that. Maybe there will actually be some kind of first-party option directly from Apple. Like it obviously works for like audio uploads, right? I actually tried that. Again, I do have a podcast creator account. I'll look into that, but apparently HLS is just for it's for streaming video, not for live streaming. So this is definitely something that a capability that I would like Apple to add, not just upload video content, but also of course allow for live streaming, become a bigger competitor for the likes of Twitch. But then of course that comes with a lot of questions about content moderation, and I don't think that Apple wants to get into that right now. Like that's a lot of people you need to hire. That's a lot of regulatory stuff that you need to consider, especially with some markets becoming much more careful of what you can be, what can expose kids to and stuff like that. So this is probably coming with iOS 26.4. Yep. And it starts testing in beta of iOS 26 already. And it will come this spring, including via podcasts on the web. And then, of course, you can also use this in CarPlay, Vision Pro, all that stuff. That's cool. Coming to 170 countries and regions, basically reaching most people in the world. Playback speeds from 0.5 to 3x for the TikTok generation that needs to watch Subway Surfers alongside whatever other content they're watching. Timed links and transcripts across over 125 million episodes in 13 languages. This is something that Apple should also be improving upon. I think that they need to support more languages. Listeners can also directly support creators through premium subscriptions with benefits like exclusive content and ad-free listening. So this is definitely something where I would love to make my content available, especially as a video, as a VOD afterwards. So again, I'll check if it actually is applicable to my content, but I also think it's just going to be much more exciting for my own consumption of that stuff, right? So this is cool, and this is something that's very much, this is Apple's software and services coming together, right? So it's HLS, it's a technology, it's of course Apple's podcast app, and it's of course Apple sharing podcast. So quite cool. We can actually refresh and see what other new stuff is apparently in iOS 26.4. Apple begins testing end-to-end encryption for RCS messages in the first beta for 26.4. So that's something for you, Jiffer, because you were talking about RCS. Now, RCS currently is not on the technological level of iMessage in all regards, encryption being one of those things. But now apparently E2EE, end-to-end encryption, is coming to RCS messages, a security feature that is not currently available for cross-platform messaging. Riley saying, I'll watch stuff on Apple Podcast 3X while playing the new Subway or Surfer City soon W. Yeah, that will be one hell of a way to consume my content. Well, that's already something you can already do with YouTube, because like, what's the maximum playback speed that YouTube allows? It's also 3X, but 3X is behind premium. I actually didn't know that. So you go up to 2X for regular stuff, and then up to 3X for premium. And apparently Apple does not lock that behind premium. So yeah, Riley, that's something to fuel your ADHD. Apple has been working with the GSM Association to implement end-to-end encryption for RCS messages. iMessage, the messaging protocol for sending text between iPhones, has long supported end-to-end encryption. RCS messages between Android devices have also featured end-to-end encryption. I believe some of that depends on the exact... Oh, is it 4X on premium? Because on iPad, it shows me 3X as the max. But maybe that's... I'll actually look into that. Actually, didn't know. No, well, 4X, man, that's some kind of that's premium brain rot. Like that's like serious stuff that's gonna melt your freaking brain. Playback speed, can I even choose that for full life? Well, it's on the iPad, it shows me oh yeah, it goes up to 4X. Oh, starting at over 2X is premium, and there's a dedicated 3X button, but yeah, you can go up to 4X. So oh my god, Apple is behind technologically. With the addition of end-to-end encryption for RCS, messages between iPhone users and Android users will eventually be just as secure as iMessage. My only question is here, does this also work for group chats? Because this is one thing where I believe it was historically complicated to integrate end-to-end encryption for RCS, so I'm not sure. Carriers will need to add support for encryption, so it may take some time, but Apple is now testing it for 26.4. So expect a rollout that's partially based, of course, on Apple launching, whether it's coming with 26.4 or maybe at some point 26.1. But yeah, this is based now on the RCS Universal Profile 3.1, and it's happening with Apple's input to that standard. So I know a lot of people have argued like, oh, Apple is like slow walking their RCS integration. I think these people forget that it took Apple until like iOS 3 and the iPhone 3GS, or in that case, it was still called actually iPhone OS 3, in 2009 to integrate MMS, even though MMS was at that point like 2 or 3 years old. And Apple did not slow walk that, right? And they did it actually, they launched MMS before launching iMessage. So they could have even like actually even killed MMS even earlier, right? By not adopting it in iPhone OS 9, and then they could have even adopted it like, oh, yeah, sure, we support standards in iOS 4, right? Which obviously is like a year away from iMessage, and then iMessage would just come around. Nobody would have really gotten used to MMS yet. So Apple is just like, they're a little bit slower in that regard, and RCS is not their standard. It's basically Google standard that's kind of carrier adopted or carrier pushed, and then also a little bit carrier customized. So, and this is basically Apple has had some input with older universal profiles of RCS, but yeah, it's basically taken up until now for Apple to feel confident, which makes sense. RCS Universal Profile 3.0 will also add features for editing text messages, deleting text messages, and relying to specific messages inline during cross-platform conversations. Now, I'm not sure. I think that these features already exist, but yeah, there's probably some form of limitation for the cross-platform versions of those features rather than Android to Android. So that will be interesting. But yeah, some people, hey, this stream started with one of you talking about RCS, and there's some good news for RCS. iOS 26.4 enables stolen device protection by default for all iPhones. I actually didn't know that that wasn't the case. So I guess you learn something every day. Stolen device protection adds extra security in case of physical iPhone theft. Apple implemented stolen device protection back in 2023 after reports about a new iPhone theft methods. Thieves would spy on an intended victim to learn their passcode, then steal the target's iPhone. With the passcode, criminals were able to empty bank accounts, access passwords, and turn off Find My. Stolen device protection requires additional authentication through Face ID or Touch ID to access certain iPhone features like the Passwords app, Lost Mode and Find My, Safari purchases, and more. Some features are disabled entirely without authentication, while others have a 1-hour security delay. Actions and have a one. Okay, we don't need to read all of that. Prior to iOS 26.4, stolen device protection had to be enabled manually in the Face ID and passcode section of the Settings app. There is an option to remove security delays when the iPhone is in a familiar location, which allows full functionality at home, but protection when out and about. iOS 26.4 is limited to developers. Okay, basically, this is standardizing an already existing feature. This also makes sense, but means Apple believes that however people use this feature, it's not intrusive enough, it's not limiting your device in any major way, so it's on by default. Again, this is also a beta preview because obviously it's part of a beta preview. Usually when stuff like this happens, we've saw that with stuff like smaller security OS updates. Not all of everything that's in a beta will actually come in the final release. So yeah, that's something that you should keep an eye out for. Just because RCS end-to-end encryption is being tested, just because default mode for stolen device protection is enabled, that does not mean that some of these features and settings will not change for the official release. Apple might change their mind. Some stuff might simply not be ready. So keep that in mind. Okay, I doubt that any of the release notes are much of a big help these days. New features you can make, known issues, apps might crash when downloading asset packs, external media, HFS external media might fail to mount automatically. Okay, once again, I do not actually recommend you install stuff like that, but like I know some people have complained about Apple's release notes. Like especially the people who are very much focused in their YouTube creation on things like obviously beta, the latest iOS and macOS betas, but yeah, it's just a little bit funny here. So yeah, nothing that big. A lot of stuff that is very codey rather than actual end user stuff. So, which also makes sense. It's the very first beta. There'll probably gonna be more releases down the. Well, they're very most likely, unless something crazy happens, are going to be more releases down the line. Also, thank you to Mac Rumors for adding. A countdown for the Apple event, 15 days, 18 hours, 31 minutes. That's quite cool. We can check 9 to 5 Mac if they maybe have something. Okay, so there are new betas for AirPods Pro 3. AirPods Pro 2 and AirPods 4. So that's something that I might install, which I mean makes sense. They usually also go hand in hand with new iOS betas. Apple Music in iOS 26.4 has new design for album, playlists, and more. So this could actually be something, and I know some of you have jokingly pitched that the new designer that's, of course, replacing Alan Dye might go back on liquid glass and everything. But I would also argue that without going back on liquid glass, we'll now are at the time when we're going to see the first examples of the new work of the design team under new leadership, because that's now been well over a month. That's usually how long it takes to make actual changes that all, like, you can redesign something in a day, but it will take a while for it to get approval. And like even like the creator studio icons, right, which I know some people did not like those app icons, right? I think that those were basically already set in stone. Maybe there have been some small tweaks before the actual release, but I think they're still very much Alan Dye design era. Like it or not, I personally don't have an issue with Alan Dye, and I know some people really don't like the way macOS handles corner radius now or whatever. I like liquid glass, but I'm also looking forward to seeing what the new design lead does. So let's look into this. iOS 26.4 Beta 1 launched today. Apple Music introduces a new full screen design for albums and playlists, plus concert info and more. So apparently, iOS 26.4 seems to be a big service update. Like Apple Music is a service and an app. Apple Podcast is a service and an app. So Apple is definitely going for it. So Eddie Q, I know some people also don't love Eddie Q. I think that Apple Eddie Q is very good at working in the background, at making Apple a buttload of money through their services. I think the way that Apple Eddie Q, now he does not personally oversee all content creation at Apple TV Plus, or now just Apple TV. But I think the way that he has given basically free hand to some very competent producers and some people who, and of course, he has been involved in licensing very great content. And now Apple, for example, bought all the rights to Severance. Like I respect that. Honestly, I'm very happy with Apple investing money there over investing like hundreds of billions into AI compute servers. Now I understand Apple will need some AI compute servers. Just please don't go all in like Microsoft and Google. Please don't brag about 30% of your code being written by AI, or like what Anthropic does, saying that 100% of their code is written by Claude. But yeah, I know that was a little bit of a side rant, but let's continue here. Apple Music has several changes coming in iOS 26.4, starting with a new full screen design for albums and playlists. When viewing an album or playlist in the updated Apple Music app, you'll notice that the track list adopts a background color that complements the artwork. So I'll guess I'll have to find a good artwork for my anime playlist, my self-created one, because I'm not sure what song. Like, I mean, I guess it would take the design of whatever song I'm currently playing, but I do not have like a separate image for it. It's not always an exact color match, but rather a color that pairs well with and evokes the artwork for the album or playlist. So it could even be a contrasty color, so you can still see the album pretty well. Additionally, Apple says that users will be able to now discover concerts right inside the music app. What? Wait, where did they say that? Is there like a newsroom announcement for that too, or is that like in the? Okay, so wherever they are saying this, it's uh, it's probably just a small. Maybe it's even like a comment directly to 95 Mac, or maybe it's something in the release notes. Um, where is it? There it is. Concerts near you, find shows in your area, and tour dates for artists you love. Right in the Apple Music. Okay, so this full screen redesign is not that big of a thing. It makes sense because Apple has already done a lot to make full screen album artwork, song artwork work on, for example, the lock screen. I think this is basically just giving parity in some ways to the app directly, which already had some of that for songs. Now it's being expanded just to albums and playlists. And that makes sense to me. Yeah. But yeah, this is not a huge redesign. When I read that it has a new design, I definitely might have gotten a little bit overexcited. But hey, liquid glass, look at this, still seems to be fully present in all of this. Maybe Apple tones it down and adapts it a little bit, but I don't think Apple is, thankfully, going back on liquid glass at all. I think they're just going to keep evolving it the same way they evolved the translucency and transparency effects in iOS 7, the way they adopted like those the flat design of iOS 7 over time, the way they did some back and forth with the Mac where it's gone flat and then regained a little bit of its three-dimensionality. So yeah, that makes sense. It's a small design update, but it just keeps Apple work rolling. I also hope that consistently with design changes and refinements, Apple also keeps making iOS 26 smoother and more efficient. We can even look if there's anything more. Apple Music, Apple Podcasts. iOS 26.4 redesigns the wallpaper gallery. Man, there's actually a good amount of change. Apple just released the first iOS 26.4 beta and seems to feature a number of under-the-hood improvements. One change includes an overhauled wallpaper gallery system. This I would actually love because this is one of the few things inside iOS I really don't think is that well designed. The wallpaper gallery has been redesigned and optimized for performance. That's great because currently it's one of the slowest things inside the settings app. That's great. The new system includes categories along the top, photo sections for featured, photo shuffle, and spatial scenes, basically redesigning, reorganizing what was already there. And familiar categories that can now be added and removed. So it becomes a little bit more similar to how the Apple Watch works, which is my opinion is how it should have always worked. For example, the new wallpaper gallery now lists sections for weather, astronomy, emoji, and more, alongside descriptions for each category. So that's also something that's very Apple-y, that focus on descriptions, meaning making sure that you can actually read it and see it. You can also see that Apple keeps that left-aligned text, so they do not return the text to the center. That's something that I've seen people discuss, whether maybe that was just an Ellen Dye thing, that Apple would return to centered text and everything. Nope, seems like Apple is doing left-aligned. To see examples within each gallery, you tap the Get button to actually add the options. Once loaded, you can browse the full collection or tap the checkmark button to remove the collection from the gallery. In addition to photo collections, the new wallpaper gallery includes preloaded collections for iOS 26 and the iPhone hardware-specific wallpapers that cannot be configured away. That makes total sense, yeah. That's basically integrated Apple branding. They were not going to delete that. Aside from changing the presentation, the new system is also much more fluid and responsive, feeling more at home with iOS 26. That's fantastic. Also, seemingly, buttons are liquid glass and everything, so that removed from gallery stuff. That's actually great. That's a lot more features. Like when Mark Gurman posted about 26.4 not having the new Siri, I assumed that 26.4 could become just a visual refinement release. But yeah, seemingly it's more than that. And yeah, it's also available on the Mac, on the Apple TV, the iPad, obviously the iPhone. One thing that concerns software, I'll actually read that because I do still want to wait another 5-10 minutes to see if there may be more iOS 26.4 features that will come out that will be discussed. But because we've already looked into Mark Gurman's stuff, Mark Gurman has actually also commented on CarPlay. To be more precise about the integration of, let's actually read it. I'm not even sure if CarPlay is here the perfect term. That's the main issue. So apparently Tesla is currently working, obviously Tesla, one of the world's largest EV makers. I know it used to be the largest by far. Now BYD is far ahead. There are many companies catching up. Elon is really not doing his best job, recently canceling the Model S and X. Like Tesla is not in a great spot right now, massively overvalued on the stock market and things like that. But this is not the focus of the story. Basically, Mark Gurman has been reporting now for a few months that Tesla is testing CarPlay integration inside their vehicles. Obviously, if you know Tesla has been very much against integrating CarPlay. CarPlay obviously overrides a lot of the integrated car user interface, making it much more Apple-y, right? Giving less control, potentially less data collection to the car manufacturer, something that the car manufacturer doesn't like to see, obviously. And Tesla, at least in comparison to the likes of General Motors, Tesla has actually built a good infotainment system into their cars. They've also built them with very fast processors, so their interface runs smoothly. They have their own EV charging ecosystem, which allows them to keep their maps much more lightweight. In a lot of other cars, the maps can be a little bit laggy and stuff like that, not even because of bad software design, but specifically because they have to consider so many different charging infrastructure options. Like here in Europe, we have like 20 EV charger providers, right? We have Ionity, EMBW, and stuff like that. So Riley's saying, BYD has hybrid electric cars for less than 1K. Elon is 10 years behind his cheaper Tesla model promise. So of course BYD gonna lead. Yeah, of course. But the reason why I can criticize that for Tesla is because Tesla is not doing everything they can. They did not update the Model S and X, right? They keep it on an old platform basically, and then they wonder why people would either rather get a Mercedes or BMW, even if they are much more expensive, right? The Model 3 and Model Y still don't have either a heads-up display that's like a laser projector on the screen, or just like a driver's side display. It requires you to look to the right all the time, to the center display, which while it is big, it's still distracting. Elon promised 50% annual growth. Now they've been dropping sales volumes 2 years, now 3 years in a, we are in the third year in a row. Elon obviously did massive brand damage. And of course, on top of all that, it's not just the sales volume. Tesla's profit margins collapsed from like 17 to 20% to now like in the 4 to 7% range. Now they're like dropping their lease and long-term financing prices down to like 3% or from 3% to like 1%. And Elon and Tesla has like a valuation of 1.5 to 1.6 trillion dollars. It's 10 times higher valued in relative to its profit than Apple, than Google, than Nvidia, like versus Google and Microsoft. It's actually like 15% higher valued almost, right? That's what I'm criticizing. The cars themselves are okay. I would still prefer probably the latest Hyundai or Kia. Like I like the Ioniq series and stuff like that. I definitely do need a driver's side display. That's not optional for me. I do not like having everything on a central display. Elon's full self-driving promises have obviously been now long overdue, being promised as far back as 2017, and then basically being guaranteed for 2019, and none of that has happened. Tesla's robotaxi rollout in Houston, Texas is an absolute joke. They're like limited now to like 20 miles inside the city where it's all like it's all mapped out and stuff like that. They refuse to adopt technologies like lidar and radar, which I consider essential to actually making FSD work. We just saw Waymo launch their sixth generation full self-driving robot taxi. That one has lidar, radar, and I believe ultrasonic sensors as well. You can replace ultrasonic sensors with short range radar, but yeah, usually you would want all three. Um, so this was not going to be an anti-Elon rant. I was just mentioning two sentences. I know, Riley, you take an issue with me being very, not even with me being anti-Elon, but with me being very vocally anti-Elon. But Elon is currently pushing for car sales and preferably taxi sales at any cost, so he can sell enough to reach his 1 trillion compensation package in Tesla stock. And CarPlay is actually a very popular feature. A lot of iOS iPhone users are basically saying that to them CarPlay is a priority when buying a car. It's one of those things where you would actually think, oh, a car is like a 20, 30, 40, 50, $60,000 purchase, right? Wouldn't it make more sense that you make your phone fit your car, right? Because your phone is like $1,000. No, to a lot of people, they just build so much of their life, their tech ecosystem around iPhone or Android in the counter alternative, and they want stuff that supports those features, right? For iPhone, it obviously would be CarPlay. Android Auto is like Google's alternative. And I guess because Teslas are mostly sold in the United States and because most Americans have iPhones, I think if they are going to integrate Google Android Auto at some point, CarPlay is definitely the priority here, right? And Tesla is basically working on integrating it, all of that, all the stuff that you would associate, Apple Music, other third-party apps. But they already have that stuff even on their own store, right? But CarPlay has a little bit more, plus again, it just is better integrated with your iPhone Live, your messages, and everything. So now Tesla is basically bending the knee a little bit and wants to integrate CarPlay. Apple is basically helping them do so. During testing, Tesla discovered compatibility hitches between Apple Maps and its in-house mapping software, which is used for self-driving features. If you know, Tesla obviously does a 3D model of your own car and the surrounding environments using basically visual intelligence that's part of the car's camera and processing system. And yeah, apparently there were some issues making that work alongside Apple Maps. Specifically, the turn-by-turn guidance from Tesla's Maps app didn't properly synchronize with Apple Maps during autonomous driving. So I actually would believe that this isn't then even the Maps app, but it's rather the car's internal understanding of where it is, right? Because you wouldn't use both maps simultaneously, but you would need basically the car and the Apple Maps app to share data back and forth, especially during autonomous driving. And I assume that Tesla still wants to have some visual representation for their autonomous features while Apple Maps is open. So, and I would assume that that is what's being discussed here, that didn't properly synchronize. I do not believe that there's any, you don't need Tesla's Maps app to work simultaneously with Apple's Maps app. You need Tesla's autonomous driving features, which are part of the Maps app, but honestly do not need to be to work alongside Apple Maps. And apparently that could create a confusing experience for users who could theoretically have both applications open side by side. And I assume that Tesla is working on a visual display of their features, of their autonomous driving features alongside Apple Maps. Now, according to Gurman, Tesla is apparently, while Apple has provided them with a way to fix it, and apparently that work is happening, apparently, according to Mark Gurman, and this is one argument where I'll completely disagree with Mark Gurman, apparently Tesla was concerned with low adoption rates for iOS 26. If you don't know, Apple recently confirmed that 74% of all iPhones released in the last 4 years run iOS 26. I believe it's 66% of all iPhones, and that compares with 76% for iOS 18. And it should also be noted that Apple announced those iOS 18 numbers earlier in the year. They announced them on January 21st, 2025, while this came obviously early to mid-February. Now, of course, to anybody who knows, iOS 26 does drop more iPhone models. It drops this iPhone model, actually, the iPhone XS and the iPhone XR and A12 based iPhones. And while iOS 18 actually prided itself of supporting all iPhones that were already supported on iOS 17. So I would argue that more than makes up for the small difference. And early in the year, we saw some numbers that suggested iOS 26 might be like 3 times slower in adoption, that it might only be like 20 to 25% at the time when like iOS 18 was like at 70%. Drew from Tylosive Tech made like a video on it, and some other YouTubers. And basically what happened there was iOS 26 has a different way of reporting, that it's iOS 26 while you're using a website. It's iOS 26 hides itself in that regard a little bit better. And a lot of usage statistics that came from websites like Mac Rumors and things like that, they showed abysmally low iOS 26 adoption rates because, especially in third-party stuff, right? Basically, that small technical difference led people to believe that iOS 26 adoption rate is 2 to 3 times slower than that of iOS 18, and that led people to believe that liquid glass is so unpopular that maybe Apple should roll it back, right? And that maybe that was the reason why Apple actually pushed out Alan Dye, rather than that he was poached away by Meta, which is actually the truth. So you can see those numbers are not too far away. They do, of course, make sense considering that iOS 26. Let's go. What's the past of let go? Let go, right? Of A12 processor iPhones. And of course, some people are a little bit more afraid of liquid glass. That I'm actually not denying, but it's not going to account for like a 3x adoption difference. It's going to account for like a 2-3% adoption difference, and that's what we are seeing basically here. So Mark Gurman, while I like getting, of course, his insights, and we are using, of course, a lot of his sources, he is sometimes vague and unspecific. Like, I do dislike the fact that nobody wants to commit to whether the iPhone 17e is actually gonna have a dynamic island or a notch display. Because to me, that's like crucial. That's like, if you're a good leaker, if you actually have really solid inside sources, I think you should know that. Yeah, let's go of A12. Okay, Riley, I don't know why my brain, like, I had a very long work day today, and I had extreme headaches. I had to take some ibuprofen. So I don't know. My grammar just left me in that moment. And you guys know my English grammar is quite good, especially for a non-native speaker. So basically CarPlay is going to come in some future version. Like, CarPlay will come to Teslas, and it should be noted that iOS 26.0 will most likely not support it. So it's going to be some version of 26.01 or 26.1, 26.2. Maybe it's going to require changes so deep that Apple will also recommend, for better CarPlay compatibility, you actually use like an iPhone with 26.4 or 26.5, but we'll have to see. I do not expect Tesla to launch it like that soon, maybe in a month or two, and then we'll see how Apple treats it on their side. We know, of course, Apple is cooperating with Elon on some stuff, whether it's stuff like this for Tesla or supposedly 5G satellite connectivity for the upcoming iPhones with the C2 modem. So yeah, while I don't love that, that's just the nature of the business and capitalism. We can have those discussions at some other time. Obviously, we have quite big news today, from the Apple event announcement to iOS 26.4 to just refreshing us on everything that we have discussed on all the hardware that's rumored for that upcoming March event. So apparently we have like macOS 26.4 will notify users of Rosetta 2 discontinuation. Obviously, Apple warned that it's being discontinued with macOS 27. They did the same thing with the initial Rosetta. They basically want to give the market one last push to adopt Apple Silicon in that regard, and they basically want to prevent, given that it can also create security, performance issues, stuff like that. Basically, your device will not be able to run Intel software. That is one thing that I do think Apple should be a little bit careful about, given the fact that there are older games and things like that people might be losing access to. But I guess Apple might tell you, yeah, at that point you can use an emulator or an older Mac that's like stuck on an older version of Mac OS. I do not love that, but it does have some precedent, and Apple has warned us in advance. So yeah, it is what it is. It is one of those things where it's basically completely opinion based. You can throw a coin and I might change my mind on any given day of the week about this. Let's see if Mac Rumors has any more features. Just that AirPods are getting new betas. I assume, of course, for beta coverage and stuff, you people will watch, like I do, people like Aaron from Solo Tech. So check out their content, and I'll, of course, keep informing you if there's anything interesting over the next couple days for me. But right now, I'm actually feeling hungry and low sugary. So I'll have to wrap this up soon. Thank you guys for joining. Obviously, I know today was more attractive to most people for joining because of such a big official thing like Apple confirming an event or an experience over 2 weeks up front. Now, of course, iOS 26.4, a beta. I even wanted to watch like Geekervent's latest video that showed like some Chinese smartphone manufacturer potentially cheating when it comes to gaming performance. But it is definitely a longer video, and I did not do a pre-watch on it, so I wouldn't know where to skip back and forth. So for that stuff, maybe join our Discord. Maybe I or maybe some of my boys will post some stuff over there. Thank you guys. Definitely. Oh, I just realized I made myself big, and you cannot actually see that I opened up YouTube with Geekervent, but yeah, you don't even really need that. Beyond all that, of course, I promise you to keep you up to date with the latest news and rumors regarding the upcoming March event. I'll be live to react to Samsung's event on February 25th, announcing the Galaxy S26 family of devices. Of course, I'll be there for the March 4th event. And well, not for the actual event, but for the actual announcements that are going to be coming in those days. I'll make sure that I don't have very long work days, Monday to Wednesday, and then hopefully by like 5 p.m. in the evening, German time, I'll be able to join you. But again, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. That way you actually know when this is happening and don't have to do any guesswork or do some manual reminders. And beyond subscribing, beyond the notification bell, like, share, comment. Don't just comment here in the live section, also comment afterwards. That helps tremendously with the algorithm. And of course, whenever you catch me live, consider supporting me directly via super chats or super stickers, or you can become a permanent supporter here on YouTube or on Patreon. Shout out to all our Mark Tech Pro Max supporters again. Thank you guys so much. This was very fun. And I'm actually starting to sweat and becoming low energy. Definitely have to get like a banana inside me. Not that way. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you soon. Probably at least once this week again, maybe on Thursday or something like that. Obviously, if Apple releases something spontaneously, I'll do a stream on that. Though I don't think that. I don't think Apple would have pre-announced this event if we were, like, say, get the iPhone 17e like this week. That would be a little weird. But hey, if they do, I'll be ready for it, and hopefully you'll enjoy that content as well. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.